Welcome to Mastering Your World Through Frequencies. In this episode, there's an introduction, an interview, and most importantly, at the end, a group frequency calibration where the frequency work happens and change is catalyzed. Enjoy.
Hi everyone, this is Karen Cheong, and I'm here with my co-host Tia Sims. We're all different. Our experiences and journeys are unique. Often, that translates into distortion patterns that are specific to you. That said, there's a group of distortion patterns that have been a fundamental part of the human experience, that are so entrenched that we just assume that's the way things are in our reality. Today, we're discussing what these distortion patterns are, how they affect our experience of our lives, and how to eliminate them so you can experience yourself as you were meant to be. And after the discussion, we get to the most important part of this episode. The group frequency calibration at the end is where the frequency work happens and where change actually occurs. So be sure to listen to that. Without releasing distortion patterns targeted by the GFC, the change you want will be more difficult to attain because you haven't addressed the root of the issue. So let's get going.
So, what are the worst distortion patterns of all?
Yeah. To me, it's funny, because we each have our own individual distortion patterns, right? Like what you run in terms of your distortions are obviously very different from mine because we have different lineage, we have different wounding, we have different past lives, so they're different. But the worst distortion patterns of all, to me, are what I call foundational distortion patterns. And what I mean by that are distortion patterns that are intertwined with the human experience, which relate to or stem from the coming down through the veil of forgetting, okay, where we disconnect or forget that we are infinite, indestructible consciousness, integral to the oneness, and the oneness integral to us.
So Which we chose.
Right. Yes, thank you for pointing that out. Yes, we absolutely chose to have this experience. We wanted to have the experience in the embodiment. It provides a tremendous amount of opportunity. And in the coming into the embodiment and in that forgetting, it's a massive forgetting. Just imagine, for eternity that you are infinite, indestructible consciousness, right? That you're integral to everything and everything is part of you. And then suddenly you're not.
It's a big jump.
It's a big jump. It's it's a big deal, And so a lot of our feeling of disconnect from the divine stems from that moment where we pierce through the veil of forgetting. And so just to remind people, based on something that you and I have talked about before, is the veil of forgetting is, that's actually quite light. It's more like a wall, okay? So it's it's pretty significant.
It's a big deal.
Yeah, no, the veil sounds like it's fluffy and light.
Light and airy.
Yes, it's not really.
Yeah.
So anyway, but it's this layer that you come through that we all agree to. Yeah. As we come into the embodiment. Now, why do we agree to this? We agree to the veil of forgetting because when you're in the embodiment and you have come through the veil of forgetting, you forget this massive thing that we just mentioned. Well, there's a lot then to transcend. And in that struggle to transcend and to remember our true nature as infinite, indestructible consciousness, there is a tremendous amount of growth and momentum that's given to us on the non-embodied realm. Okay, because you exist not just here, you exist as also this much larger infinite consciousness, right? Indestructible consciousness that's having this experience, and then you're just a fragment of this in the embodiment, right? So it allows that consciousness to increase its resonance level because you, as a fragment of it, as an embodied fragment of it, are experiencing all of this obstacle, all of this challenge, all of this stuff that you have to overcome, and then overcoming it, which is pretty spectacular.
So that's why we chose to overcome the struggle.
Yeah.
And to feel the effects of growth.
Yeah, and to remember our true nature, because there's so much keeping us from it, right?
Right.
Like we think we're finite. We think that we're just this physical body.
Yeah.
We don't really have much visibility into death. You know what I mean? We don't know.
Yeah.
And so because there's so much unknown, right? To return to that state where you feel your brilliance, where you feel that expansiveness, that awe, that like connection to something bigger because you are that something bigger. That is huge because there's so much challenge in what I said in terms of the finiteness, the thoughts, the emotions, the pain body, the ego mind, all this sort of stuff.
So why would we want to do that though?
Yeah,
you know,
because like I said, there's so much to transcend, and even in like the pain of it, right, the challenge of it, there's something kind of glorious about it too, right? It's like a very human experience. It's like, why do you want to go to Paris? You know,
Got it.
You go to Paris because you want to eat baguette, and you want to experience the beauty there. You know, the architecture and the design and all that sort of stuff, right? Like most people, well, many people who travel want to go and immerse themselves in that experience because it's different from what they experience.
So
right?
our spirit wants to immerse itself in the experience of human.
Exactly.
Yes, because I know I always go back to this in my mind, like spirit can't touch things.
That's right.
And smell things and taste things and talk to, like it's a whole different, it's just pure bliss.
Yeah.
Versus like getting to do these cool human things.
Yeah. Or even like grief. Okay.
Right.
Which is terrible, right? Honestly, because you know it's a horrible feeling, but that like the rawness of that grief, you don't feel that on spirit level. When you're disembodied consciousness, it's kind of floating around. It's kind of diffuse. You know what I mean? Like emotion's not as like you know, as like visceral. Yeah, exactly. Or like even like heartbreak, which can be really traumatic for people, right? I'm not saying it's glorious. I'm not suggesting wallow in it. But there is this like, you know, like for example, your first love, right? When you break up with them and it's like so terrible, right?
Yeah.
And it's like very, very painful. But the pain of it, the like getting over it, all of that's so human. You know what I mean?
It's better to have loved and lost than to never love at all.
Well, yeah, exactly. It's true
It's
though,
that,
right?
Yeah.
Because you get all that experience, and I'm not even talking about the positive emotion, right? And like there are moments where like of like courage, right? That people, well, they do something like extraordinarily moving. It's such a small thing, but yet we can be like there's this little thing that I saw. I'm not on social media very often. There was this little clip that caught my eye. It looked like Brazil or something like this. But this little boy was out with a cloth. He was probably like 5, okay, cleaning cars, like in a traffic jam, right, for money, right? So he would spray it and then he would wipe. Anyway, so he's standing there and he's like wiping like the back door of a car, and the window rolls down, and there's a boy who is about his age. Okay, so that's okay. And so these boys are looking at each other. They're the same age, but very different. One's in a BMW and one's cleaning the car. Okay, very different. But the boys don't really know that. So anyway, the boy inside the car gives the boy outside the car like a little car that he's playing with. So the boy takes it and he rolls it on the ground and he gives it back to the boy. And the boy says, "Oh, I've got one too." So they start playing cars like outside the window. And then he's got a truck. So he gives the kid the truck. So the truck, he plays with the truck, and then the little boy realizes it's not his. So he gives it back. And the little kid pushes it away. He's like, "No, you take it." And so he's like, "No, you take it." So the little kid takes the truck.
The little kid in the BMW.
BMW gives the truck to the little kid, right?
Yeah.
So it's the little kid in the car, little boy outside with the cloth cleaning, tries to give the toy back.
Got it.
I'm sorry.
And he's like, "No, keep it."
He's like, "No," he pushes it away back to the boy cleaning. He's like, "No, keep it." So the boy now has this truck, and he's like, "Oh," so he disappears, like off camera, right? And he comes back with this little bag of fried plantains to give him something, you know, like he got a gift.
Yeah.
So he's sharing. He's like, "What?" So then what does the little boy in the car do? He opens the bag of plantains, and they're sitting there snacking together. I was like, what? Like, that's such a beautiful exchange. And you know who's filming it? Not the mother. It's another motorist
Just
stuck in
someone in the
traffic
car.
who's filming this, like inside their car. There's this beautiful little exchange. They're just sharing.
Oh, what a perfect little
And
story.
then the car, eventually the traffic moves.
Yeah.
And the guy outside is like waving to his friend, you know, because he's just like his friend's leaving. But even in that, it's like sad, you know, because he's like, "Oh, I had a friend, he was leaving," you know.
Yes.
But even, do you understand that kind of poignancy?
Yes.
Do you have that as a disembodied consciousness? Not really. Not the same level.
No.
You know, there's like something about that is so moving. You know?
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because that can help people, just that little story, like help people move through their emotions and to kind of honor them, whatever they are.
Yeah.
Emotions are not a bad thing.
Exactly.
They can be really beautiful if you just kind of witness them and allow them to be, and just feel them. And then they will naturally
dissipate.
move on.
Yeah. Now, the thing about foundational distortion patterns, okay, which is where we we had sort of started.
Yeah, I know. Totally.
Our tangent took off.
Tangent.
Which happens. But I think an important one. So foundational distortion patterns are, like I said, part of the human experience. So we don't even notice that they're there. That's why they're so insidious. Okay. And we just assume that's how the reality is. So for example, fear of loss is a very foundational distortion pattern, right? We're terrified of losing stuff. People in our lives.
Things, anything.
People even, right? Like we're terrified of like losing the people we love. Yeah. So we do all this crazy stuff to not lose them. Or people that we don't even love anymore. But we can't let them go. Right. You know, that happens too, right? Where people, right? Because we're afraid of losing them. Like, what if something better doesn't come along? Yeah. Right? And then we stay in that relationship, right? So fear of loss is like such a fundamental distortion pattern. And it comes from the disconnect from spirit, right? Where you don't realize you're this infinite being, this infinite consciousness, this limitless being that has access to everything. It comes from scarcity. Is my point, right?
That's the other foundational.
Another foundational one is absolute scarcity, right? Where you feel like you're not complete, that you're not enough, that you have to strive to get something outside of yourself to feel complete. All of those, whether it's a person or a thing or whatever you think it is, a circumstance, like both of those things are foundational. We don't really see them. We just think, oh, that's just part of the human experience, and I'm just kind of like this. Runs through everyone. It doesn't matter what your race, your class, it doesn't matter. When you're born, it's there. And so the only way that I know of to release something, you can try and use different mindset things and all that stuff, but it doesn't really work because ultimately that's programmed into us and we have to release them at the, sometimes deep into the DNA level to release it so that we can have a different experience, which is, it sounds like, oh, we're just going to release it. It's a huge deal. Like humans have had this like since the dawn of time, like, you know, just in terms of humanness. And it comes, like I said, from that coming through that veil of forgetting. And some of us distort pretty heavily, right? Some of us come through and it's like a little traumatic and we kind of like, you know, can deal a little bit. For others, because not only coming through the veil of forgetting and they're forgetting their limitlessness, they also distort because now they're all of a sudden in linear time. They're like, oh, I'm not even in the eternal now anymore. I'm in linear time, which is much more compressed, much more rigid, much more linear. And it's like, oh no. You know, like, I don't know this is like a lot. I don't know if I thought it would be kind of like this, but I didn't quite realize what it was going to be, right? So there's a little bit of trauma there. Yeah. So until you can release the distortion around that, coming through that veil, and then also, and like I said, not everyone distorts at the same level, right? Yeah. Some people come in and they're okay, right? And because just of who they are.
But they still have the foundation.
They still have this foundational distortion pattern, which of course can totally influence your experience of the world in a way that's not great. So yeah, that's why I think they're the worst ones, because you don't even know they're necessarily there.
Okay, so this GFC is huge.
Yeah.
And I know you have deep dives on each topic.
Yeah.
So are there like just like a certain amount of foundational ones? Like can you name them, or is it kind of like a lot, but you can name some of them?
So I'll name some of them to the best of my ability. Okay, so absolute scarcity is one, which is where you feel like you need something external to complete yourself. Yeah. The fear of loss, like I said, is another one. The also spirit debt.
I was just going to ask about that. Perfect. Yeah. Can you talk a little about that? Because there's an episode on it, but it's a little ways back.
Yeah. So if you want more, like Tia said, go back and look at the one called spirit debt. So spirit debt is where it's like a disproportionate exchange in terms of receiving. So meaning that you have to give a lot in order to receive very little. Yeah. Okay? So meaning you might have to give up, like for example, like your life force or your time or your focus or like emotional stability or even mental stability in order to get something else. You usually have a much lesser quality. So it could be like a sense of security in a relationship or job security or money or happiness, you know? But you get not very much of it, but a lot. You have to output a lot in order to receive that small amount.
What about like when someone's like, you know, you got to work real hard these days to get what you want, you know, like people who work every day constantly and they just feel like, where's the money going? Like that's a pattern you're running and that affects your reality.
Totally. And it will show up in different ways, right? So for some people it's money, some people it's love.
Oh.
Right? So for some people where they're challenged with relationship, it's like, it doesn't matter. It's like they go into like a lot of like self-abuse or self-punishment because people abuse them a lot. And in order for them to feel like loved or accepted or seen or heard. So they have to give a lot of themselves in order to receive a little bit from others.
In relationship.
Yeah, it can be really, it can be really debilitating. So it's not just like money.
Yeah.
Right? It could be a relationship. It could be self-worth, for example, can show up like this.
So is low self-worth non-deserving a foundational?
Yes, it's a foundational distortion pattern. Yep, it is. Yep, there it is.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's another big one. Especially, so low self-worth non-deserving is a huge one for what I call old souls. Okay, those of us who've been here for a while and been incarnating, then what I would call an old soul who comes from a higher resonating place of consciousness to begin with, embodies, and then incarnates for a while to get to this point, by the way, people, in your life where you get to free and become awake. You've been working all these lifetimes to come into this higher level of consciousness.
Oh, which is right
now.
So that's why it's a big deal.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like some of us have been here for like millennia trying to like get to this point.
We get to here.
Yes, because when we came in, the consciousness level was so low. So you come in, you're like, whoa.
like cavemen.
Yeah, or like really like maybe just a little bit beyond that. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Like, but close, you know, consciousness very low, very dense, tribal, for example.
Sure.
You know? And so you have that going on, and then you have, you first coming into this experience of human. For some, they remember a higher level of consciousness. It's really difficult. So they incarnate over time, waiting for consciousness to rise enough so that they also can have the experience of the human, having this experience of consciousness rising and their own personal consciousness rising. They forget that a little bit along the way in all these incarnations, but there's something that's pushing them to seek, to find something.
Each lifetime to seek.
To find that connection that they're like, I know it's there, right? So a lot of those people are that's what I would call an old soul, right? So some of the old souls didn't come in right into like a consciousness that was low. Some of them would come in through like a society like Lemuria, which by the way existed, people. So just so you know, it existed. And that consciousness was higher. Okay.
And what is that?
So Lemuria is what was before Atlantis. So Lemuria was.
I've never heard of that.
Yeah. So Lemuria was like a culture, let's just say, where it was of a higher level order, where it was more new beings from a higher level order, and they remembered more, okay? So they were a little bit separate from the other humans. And they were able to cultivate practices that like using their remembering, does that make sense, of this higher level order. So for those Lemurians, a lot of them are now coming of age, like they're coming into of age now, meaning like they've been reincarnating. They're like, yes, we're here, we've made it. Okay, so not everybody listening to this is a Lemurian, or just so you know, some of you are, some of you are not. It doesn't matter, but I'm just making a distinction.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so depending on who you are as an old soul, but that's why this time is so critical. And when you release foundational distortion patterns for old souls in particular, like low self-worth, non-deserving, which is a trigger for old souls. When you release that, it's such huge freedom because you've been incarnating so many lifetimes with this pattern over and over and over again as part of your experience as a humanist. And when you release it, you're like, oh my God, this is who I really am. And I've been waiting. I've been waiting for this moment, right? So it's really awesome. Even if that moment is just fleeting for now and then becomes more, it's still like, that's right, like an embodied remembering.
Yeah,
like,
at least you touched on it.
Yeah.
Right.
You're right. This is the human experience without that. Awesome. So yeah, releasing the foundational distortion patterns is a really huge deal. Also, because when you release the foundational distortion patterns, they're really heavy. I mean, just think about it. It's like fundamentally, they're about disconnection for who we truly are. It's like a really big deal.
Yeah. Does that mean all the foundational ones are at the DNA level?
Many of them are.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. I was just like, let me just scan that. I actually don't know the answer to that question. Yes. Okay. So yes, they are. And so that's how hardwired in they are to us as humans. Yeah. So to get to the new consciousness, right? To be able to, it's not like you're getting anywhere, it's to be able to integrate the higher level consciousness frequencies, of the new consciousness. it's important to release these heavier, denser foundational distortion patterns. Why? Because they're freaking heavy. And in order to be able to integrate those higher level frequencies, you have to get rid of the crud.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
If not, you just can't.
You can't access it.
You can't access it.
Okay.
Yeah. That's why releasing the foundational distortion patterns are so key.
Okay.
Right? So we address this in a number of deep dives, as you said. Module 1 of Coherence Mastery just goes at really hard a lot of the fundamental distortion, foundational and just really deep ones that run in through the human. So those, if you're really interested in that, even completing Module 1 of Coherence Mastery, you'll start to see a shift. Because you know what's cool is that once you start releasing one foundational distortion pattern, then under the other fundamental ones, instead of just one breaking away from you, you start to break away, they start to clump. And break away together, which is really cool. And I've heard you say this too, where you've experienced, you're like, okay, I thought it was this, and then I cleared a bunch of stuff, and then I feel so much more buoyant after. It's because you're not just releasing one, you're releasing many now at the same time. Even if you're not and that was dick.
No, it doesn't happen like that.
No, you're just like,
I thought it would.
What? No. But when it's gone, you're like, wow, that was huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's cool to get to the point where it's like they don't come back.
Yeah.
You know, I'm finally kind of at that point too, where a lot of them it's like, oh, that's done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't that cool?
I don't know if it'll come back in a year or something, but at least it seems like it's done.
Done for now. Yeah. That's awesome.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Okay, Karen. So thank you. The GFC after this, some deep dives, and just to keep listening to them, right? Until you feel like you can move on to the next.
Exactly. And then you will find that there's no other way around the foundational distortion patterns. It really is the frequency work. You can't think your way around these distortions. Right. You can't. It's because it's too high of a resonance and too embedded in you. The important thing to do also is to, because these are so foundational, right? Absolute scarcity is a really big deal. It's in our lineages, it's in our cultures, it's in our religions now, it's in our consumerism, it's everywhere, right? It's just everywhere. So it's really important to confirm the removal. You gotta be on it with the confirming the removal, because it'll flare up, right? I mean, it's these are really deep things that you're releasing. It's not like a casual little distortion pattern. It's foundational.
I'm really glad you mentioned that. So for listeners that maybe this is their first podcast, confirming the removal is a process where you can actually purchase the GFC on your website, and you can play that one whether you're in the moment of experiencing a detox, right?
Or
if it's in the past.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I found that to be really, really helpful.
Totally. And it's necessary because, to your point, I mean, I remove the distortion patterns at frequency level. And because you guys all have free will to some degree, right? Whether it's less or more, you get more as you clear. You have to release the distortion patterns out of the lower resonating fields of the physical, mental, emotional realm. It's your choice. It's your journey.
You can't do that for us.
I can't do that. Karen can't do that for you. This is you guys choosing to be I don't want this anymore. I am free. Get out. And that's why it's so important. Because if you're just passive, right, just lying there, that's not empowering at all. That means I'm just you know what I mean? Then you're hoping that someone else saves you. There's no empowerment there. It's just do you know what I mean?
Yes.
It's there's no accountability, there's no empowerment, there's no upward momentum, nothing happens.
And that's not what we want to start
cultivating. So confirming the removal is one of your most powerful tools in your toolkit for this work and for seeing change in your life. Because people are oftentimes people are when will I see massive change? I'm have you been confirming the removal of your patterns? They're what's that? I'm we need to do that a little bit first in order to get it out of your field so you can see the massive change that you want.
Yeah, and you would recommend doing that GFC, right? Or just confirming them on your own?
I think most people when they start don't know how to do that.
Sure.
So
in the beginning,
use it. It's a 5-step process, but you're a pro now, so you just can do it, right?
Yeah, I kind of have been doing it.
Yeah, totally.
If I get a really crunchy one, I'll play it.
Yeah, for help.
Yeah,
exactly. Extra momentum.
Yeah.
And then what will happen is that as your resonance rises even more, for people who want to know what happens, look, you're going to have distortion until you die, okay? Because the distortion is the thing that keeps you from fully being merged back into the one. That's just the way it is. So your physicalness is a distortion. It's not bad, it's just a distortion. Does that make sense? So people think of distortion as only negative, but it's not. It just keeps you from being merged back. So you're going to have distortion. You're human. That's just part of the deal. So The thing is, though, as you rise in frequency resonance, it becomes less important to you to know what they are in order to release them. You're just like, okay, I can sense the distortion. Yeah, it's right here. Okay, I'm going to keep my attention on it, and now you can release it, type of thing, right? So it's like it doesn't, you know what I mean? The story of like what the distortion pattern is.
How
I got it. Yeah. Who did this to me?
Oh, no. Yeah. It's like, just get rid of it. Let's move on. Yeah. Okay.
Exactly.
Trying to ascend here. Okay.
Yeah, it's a little bit like, all right, let's go.
Yeah.
Chop, chop.
Yeah, chop, chop. Perfect. Well, thank you so much for this topic, because clearly this is huge.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of tools now.
Yeah.
A lot of information. Perfect. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
So we're about to start the group frequency calibration, where we actually do the frequency work and where change is catalyzed. To get to the GFC, click on the square that'll appear to the right or the link in the description below. Because I'm working on frequency level, GFCs are not like regular meditations. Many people go into a somewhat altered state, so please don't drive while listening to this. It's time to bring in a new experience, a new consciousness, and a new world. Let's rise together.